Tiny and frail, but somehow alive. The child is pulled from the rubble. Videos of survivors rescued from Venezuela's devastating earthquakes are still emerging. Moments of relief amid so much suffering. The efforts have been led by local people themselves, using whatever they can. They face a Herculean task in a state crippled by years of corruption, sanctions and economic crises. Sahedi is heading from the capital Caracas to the worst affected region, La Guaira. She passes others making the same journey. Ordinary people carrying what little they can afford to share. Sahedi hasn't been able to contact her mother since the powerful twin earthquakes struck.
The only information we get comes from local residents who manage to record videos. Our neighborhood, Playa Verde, hasn't appeared much online, but I was able to see areas around my mother's house, and nearby neighborhoods are badly destroyed. My mother is older, and your mind starts imagining all kinds of things because you're seeing people die.
Large parts of La Guaira to the north of Caracas have been completely levelled. These are the critical hours when survivors can still be found alive. But local officials have nowhere near the resources they need.
Right now, I have so many conflicting emotions that I can't define them. It could be sadness, but at the same time worry, and also a feeling of helplessness. Because I look over there and see places where entire buildings have collapsed, and there are only 2 people trying to pull something out with just headlamps.
International search and rescue teams from around the region and further afield are now in the country as the response to this disaster ramps up. It's the biggest challenge so far for Venezuela's interim leader, Delcy Rodriguez. She came to power after her former boss, the authoritarian president Nicolas Maduro, was ousted and detained by US special forces. Recovering from years of international isolation already looked a daunting task. Rehousing thousands of people will now make it even harder. In some areas, incidents of looting have been reported. It's easy to imagine public frustration growing. Sahedi is unable to reach her family's home. The roads are closed. All around her, people with their own stories of trauma and loss. My 2 grandchildren and my husband were killed, this woman says. My neighbour and his son too. She describes the moment the earthquake struck.
The shaking, it was terrifying. I was in the bathroom, and when I turned around, I was already trapped. I began pushing with my arms until I broke through the rubble, and I started screaming.
Eventually, Sahedi manages to find a way to her mother's home, unsure of what she'll find. Then, relief and joy as they embrace. For so many others here, though, there'll be no such happy ending.
Well, joining me now, the Venezuelan opposition politician, Freddy Guevara. He co-founded the Popular Will Party of the former opposition leader, Juan Guaido, and has been in exile since 2021. Do you think Venezuela needs international help?
No, for sure. No, there's no question about it. And it's very sad. I mean, for me, of course, it's very personal, but for other Venezuelans too, because it's like a war zone, but without bombs, you know? And it's particularly very heartbreaking when you see firefighters, first rescuers, first responders without tools. So of course we need international support. Now it's almost 48 hours since it happened. and there's still people alive below rubbles, and they are there because we have no state. The state has no capacity. After years of years on corruption and mismanagement and everything, people are on their own. So if we don't have international help, we're going to have thousands and thousands of deaths.
I mean, Donald Trump suggested that his intervention and arrest of Maduro and the arrival of Delcy Rodriguez was some sort of transformation of Venezuela. Has it changed anything in reality?
Well, of course, an earthquake can happen to anyone. So it will be dumb. I mean, of course, I'm against the Venezuelan regime, but it will be dumb of my part to say that the earthquake is their fault. But what is their fault is the lack of capacity of the state to respond. That's something that it's very different. And people could say, well, it's a country in Latin America, it's not prepared. When you compare like what happened in other countries like Colombia, Brazil, Chile, Mexico, this is absolutely absurd. El Salvador, who is a small country from Central America, has been sending 4 planes of people, and they arrive at midnight, and 6 hours passed since the moment they allowed them to start working. So, of course, the country is better without Maduro. But this situation that we're having now is the consequence, of course, of years or decades of corruption and mismanagement, but also, of course, the actual regime who is now leading the nation doesn't have neither the capacity or the empathy to do what she needs to do.
Do you think the failure of the state to be able to cope with this could lead to any kind of political change, or is the grip of the regime too strong?
It's hard to predict. When we see many episodes in history in authoritarian regimes that face with this type of calamities, many of them produce more liberalization forces. That happened in Mexico, that happened also in Dominican Republic. Turkey, it's a different example. I think that whatever happens will depend on what we do, right? And this is a externality. This is something that we don't control. But whatever we do will help us to accelerate the democratic transition, because now more than ever, and people could think, well, why are you talking about this? If politics is a natural disaster? Well, everything is politics. Because if you don't have a good government, if you would have a different government that wouldn't have the biggest cases of corruption in the history of Latin America, and that's a lot to say, well, we wouldn't have the situation that we have now with firefighters using their cell phones to try to find people.
And do you think that corruption has also affected the extent of the damage? You know, tower blocks should usually be able to withstand an earthquake.
For sure. I mean, there's a lot of things. First, many of the houses that fell are part of a social program of the government that for years, the architects and the constructors in Venezuela, the guilds, the engineers have been saying, this is wrong. You made it in a bad way. For years, you have experts saying that the country needed the maintenance of infrastructure. And for years, people have been denouncing that the police, even the armed forces and the firefighters were not equipped enough. And they just buy guns, but they didn't buy the things that people really needed to be safe. So 100% sure that corruption, the earthquake, of course, it's a thing of Mother Nature. But the amount of calamity, the amount of death and destruction that we're facing, there's no other one to blame than the corruption and the mismanagement of this regime.
Freddy Guevara, thank you very much.